run down home. She hasn't received any news of her son since he had left for Gallipoli, so she rushes to the door in hope of a letter from him. Even more than a letter, she hopes that he had returned. She opens the door, slowly in anticipation, but she is not greeted by the smiling face of her son, nor is the man standing before her showing any sign of good news. Her heart sinks as her mood switches from one of hope to one of unease, one of potential despair. "I'm so sorry," the soldier says as he passes her a letter. The solemn look on his face and the tone of his voice sends a shiver down her spine. The letter read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it is my sad duty to inform you that your son, Private John Robert Smith, registration number 1898, was killed in action on the 5th day of August 1915. She fell to her knees and screamed, letting the tears make tracks down her cheeks. On the 25th of April 1915, 8 months into the First World War, the New Zealand and Australian Anzacs landed on the peninsula of Gallipoli. 8,556 New Zealand soldiers and Australian Anzacs lost their lives during their peacekeeping efforts in Gallipoli, and even more in Passchendaele. Thousands of Allied soldiers landed on the shores of Gallipoli, and many were barely older than I am. These young men played a crucial role in shaping our nation as it is seen international and as it is perceived by us as its citizens. These courageous men put body and soul on the line for the defence of the world as we know it today, for the defence of our societies. They strove to maintain peace in the increasingly war-ravaged times that were upon them. They should never be forgotten and always commemorated. Although the campaign at Gallipoli was and still is considered a military disaster, with a quarter of the Kiwi Anzacs that landed gunned down on the peninsula. These brave heroes played a crucial role in the development of our national identity. Skeptics will say that these men lost their lives for no reason at all, that we should not remember these men as heroes, but as Kiwis, we should continue to commemorate and revere the tremendous efforts that these soldiers put into the defence of the ideals of peace. These men who fought in any war that was for a just cause helped to shape our national identity on a world scale. These efforts in 5 major wars, resulting in thousands of New Zealand deaths, established New Zealand as a nation that, regardless of its size and military strength, was prepared to fight for the good of both ourselves and others. The example of these courageous heroes who fought so hard for our freedom, who fought against the oppressors of peace, should never be forgotten. Even today, there are soldiers in our armed forces fighting and training troops to maintain peace in other countries. Our soldiers who have been fighting against much larger enemies and much larger military forces in the aid of others should always be honoured. Although they're still honoured every year on Anzac Day by the families of loved ones lost, and many travel to Gallipoli to commemorate the heroism of these soldiers. This is not enough, as more and more people are losing and throwing aside the meaning of Anzac Day. Too many young people in today's societies are losing their sense of reverence for these heroes and their sense of what really matters in life. Today's youth is spending an ever-increasing amount of time behind a closed, soundproof door of materialism, too worried about their computer, their clothes, or their cell phone. More and more young people do not bother to come up at a dawn parade or to acknowledge our fallen heroes in any way at all, and are using this day as an excuse for a day out of school or a day out of work. If this downward spiral were to follow its current trend, then the future generations of Kiwis will not learn of the mistakes and tragedies that our soldiers past and present have endured. If this becomes reality, then we can expect military disasters like Gallipoli to repeat themselves, and we will begin to lose our national identity. We can take the example of these great men and apply it to our everyday lives by putting our best effort into all we do every day and never take for granted the lives we live. Above all, we must always promote peace and oppose war. It can start from right now. If we all do our part to ensure that we avoid conflict at all costs, we will begin to develop a new national identity, one where there will no longer be the destructive force of war in our societies. If we can learn from our past mistakes and never forget the efforts of these men to maintain peace in our world, one day mothers like Mrs. Smith will not have to mourn the loss of a son. The tears began to well up in Mrs. Smith's eyes as the trumpeteers sounded the last toast. The tears still came, even though his passing had been so long ago. Looking around her, she saw the mourning faces of families who had lost a son, husband, brother, nephew, friend, just like she had. Although she felt their grief, there was comfort to be found in the fact that her son and the loved ones of others had not been forgotten. She found comfort in his remembrance. So fruitless a death it seemed, so unexpectedly it came. Putting aside the grief, she knows that he died for her. He died for the well-being of his country, who lost his life for us. Although every year on Anzac Day, she is called to remember her son, she also remembers and reveres the men who not only fought alongside her son, but who are still fighting today. Those whose efforts should not go unnoticed by their nation. Those who fight for freedom. We should never ever forget the ordeals that these men went through for the prospect of peace. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight of limb, true of eyes, steady in glow. They were staunch to the end against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We must remember them.